When you're strumming Spanish guitar, it doesn't matter what fingers you use. And what do these arrows mean? And what do these numbers mean? And what do these symbols mean? Well, if you're just getting started with Spanish guitar, let me show you how to interpret some of these symbols and how to count properly and how to really start strumming the right way for nylon string guitar. And just a quick note, if you haven't seen these chord grids before or tablature, just want to tell you that the vertical lines on the chord grids represent strings and the horizontal lines are the frets. Basically, you put your fingers where the dots are there, or just imagine the guitar is vertical like this. It's kind of a picture of the guitar in that way. And for tablature, the horizontal lines represent strings, the lowest one being the one that's closest to you, the sixth string. So if you ever forget that and you get it backwards, just flip the guitar up like this, and the line on the bottom is the sixth string. So we're not going to do any chords just yet. We're just going to use open strings so we can talk about what's happening in the right hand. Of course, that's a really important part of strumming. We need to know what the letters are for the right hand. So you got to memorize P, I, M, A, and I use the letter E for pinky. You'll sometimes see the letter X or S used, but anything other than Pima, P-I-M-A, must be your pinky. Okay, let's start with the open strings, no left hand, and nothing but the index finger, that's the letter I. Your thumb can be on the sixth string. That's a really great place to anchor it, and that kind of keeps everything in place. Can help you stabilize the guitar too. But for now, we're just going down with the index finger. It doesn't really matter how many strings we're hitting. So when you see that written on the page, what I have on the screen is what we would call standard notation. Every instrument can read that. But below it is the tablature, which is the guitar kind of cheating translation of what's happening above. So when we have this combination of tablature and what we call standard notation together on one page, you see a lot of the notations for how we're going to strum, what direction, what fingers we're going to use up in the notation rather than inside the tablature. But sometimes you'll see tablature like this, where the rhythmic notation, which we'll talk about coming up, is kind of incorporated into the tablature. For this video, we're going to see both, and we'll have one line that's standard notation and one line that's tablature. Okay, so we're going down with the index finger, and now let's start counting. We're going to count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, time signatures are what we need to talk about next. When you see this time signature, we call it 4/4 time. What that means is there's 4 quarter notes per measure. We're going to learn what a quarter note is in a second. Actually, you just played it. And 3/4 time is the next most common, where we play 3 beats in a measure and the quarter note gets the beat. The lower number tells us what type of note we're using to count those beats, but you never really have to worry about that low number. It's really just the upper one is the number that we're going to count to every measure. Quarter notes look like this on the page. We're doing it in tablature, so we just see zeros because all the strings are open. If we put a finger on a fret, we're going to see a number on that string. In the notation above it, you see the letter I and an arrow going towards the ceiling, and that is counterintuitive, but remember, the tablature is upside down, so when we strum towards the floor, we're actually going in the direction of the ceiling as it relates to the page. So pretty weird, but it looks like an up arrow, but it's really down, and that is super confusing for a lot of people. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, a quarter note looks like this, and it gets 1 beat. Now, we're not reading music really. I think it's important to understand the basics of strumming notation. So if you never learn how to read music, at least understanding quarter notes and eighth notes, I think that's really important. You can always use the tablature for the translation of where to put your fingers. So quarter notes look like this. They have a black note head, we call it, and a stem. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're very often, not all the time, but almost always going to strum down on the numbers. Those are the beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, as you're making this downward motion, notice how you have to come up just to make the downward motion again. You're not thinking about it, but you're making that upward motion. Let's hit those upstrokes that we're already producing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're playing twice per beat. And these are called eighth notes. 8 of them per measure instead of 4. Each one of them represents an eighth of the measure in 4/4 time. This sounds like a bunch of math. Don't even worry about it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3 and 4 and. Now, just so that you know, a half note looks like this. You can see through it, and that would be 2 beats. So it's like 2 quarter notes put together. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a whole note looks like this. It doesn't have a stem at all, and we can strum down and just let it go for 4 whole beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. So quickly, let's do one of each. We'll do a measure of one whole note, then we'll do half notes, then we'll do quarter notes, and then eighth notes. That's all we're dealing with today. Of course, there's also 16th notes and 32nd notes, and we can go beyond that. But we really only need to get up to 16th notes to have all that we need. But in this video, we're not even getting to 16th notes, just eighth notes. Okay, so here we go. Now, this is important. If you've never done this before, you got to do this. Whole note. 1, 2, 3, 4 half notes. 1, 2, 3, 4 quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we got our eighth notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And now, if we were in 3/4 time, we could do something similar where we would go 1, 2, 3, 1 and 2 and 3 and. In Spanish guitar, you're going to see a lot of things that are in 3/4 time, waltzes, malagueña, and things like that. If you get into flamenco, sometimes we're counting to 12. That's a whole other can of worms. Right now, we're keeping it basic. 4/4 time is the most common time signature, but you're going to see a lot of 3/4 time for sure. Okay, now let's mix quarter notes and eighth notes together. It's going to get fun in a minute, I promise. 1, 2, 3, 4 eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And let's do one every other beat. So we'll go quarter note, 2 eighth notes, quarter note, then 2 eighth notes. 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2 and 3, 4 and. Let's do that with just the thumb now. 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2 and 3, 4 and. So notice that the letter changes in the notation, and that's really telling you exactly what finger to use. It's easy to disregard it if you only read tablature. You got to look up in the notation because there's a lot of helpful stuff there to tell you what to do in the right and left hands more explicitly, especially when something's difficult. In this video, we're talking about just strumming, but if you want to check out the 3 most essential techniques for nylon string guitar, download my PDF guide below this video. Okay, now we're going to do a slightly different pattern. We're going to do a quarter note and then all eighth notes in 4/4 time. That looks like this. 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and. But this time, every time that we go up, let's let our thumb be the one that goes up and continue to go down with our index finger on each beat. 1, 2 and 3 and 4. It's getting a little bit weird now. When you prepare that thumb upstroke, you can kind of pivot like this, turn a little bit if you need to, or stretch your thumb down like this. We need, I think, a little bit of both of those things, but it doesn't need to be too drastic or wild. We want to keep it kind of as still as we can. 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Notice when I do this downstroke on the first beat with my index, my thumb comes back here. That's our default position for so much strumming stuff. If that feels weird, it's okay if you float around for now, but I think it would be great to have a habit of just having your thumb on the 6th string all the time. 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and. One thing to mention, when you do upstrokes, you're probably going to hit fewer strings, and that is a good thing. We don't want to do all of them, or sometimes our fingers can think that they should strum all of the strings, especially on upstrokes, and that causes your whole arm to go up like that, which we don't want. And so upstrokes are happening in between the beats, as I mentioned. We're almost always going down on those numbers, and that's important. Those are heavier spots in the measure, in between and not so heavy, so it makes perfect sense that we do fewer strings. It feels better and sounds better, and it has a more of a dynamism to it than just playing everything exactly the same way. So we're going 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and. At the beginning of this video, I said, does it matter what fingers you use? It really doesn't. It's up to you, but certain finger combinations make sense in certain cases and have a certain volume to them and a certain ambience. The thumb can be very loud and heavy, and we can take the middle and ring fingers and squeeze them together to get more volume. So now we can go down with M and A. Keep them squeezed together all the way through. Don't let them separate when you're done. Keep them together. 1, 2, 3. That's a good practice. Kind of weird to do that. And now let's do the rhythm that we just did, continuing to go up with our thumb, and now we're down with M and A. 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Let's do the same exact thing in 3/4 time. We're going to cut out a beat. 1, 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and. Okay, now it's time to use our left hand. Let's play an E chord. It looks like this. My middle finger is playing the 2nd fret of the 5th string. That's the dot there on that line, and then tuck your ring finger underneath that. That is an E note, the 4th string, 2nd fret, and then we play the 1st fret of the 3rd string, and we're gonna play all the strings. So let's go back to that rhythm now and only use the index. 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2, and 3, and go faster if you can. The reason that we're doing a quarter note on the first beat is so that stands out more. That's an accented part of the measure. So 1, 2, hit it harder if you need to. Now we just take this shape and scoot it up 1 fret every other measure. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Slow down. 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2, and 3, and so now, if you're just starting out and you can play that E chord, you are now playing the rhythm to Malagueña. Ever heard that before? This is the underlying rhythm that's kind of that riff is based on. Now our thumb was on the 6th string, which doesn't have to be actually for an E chord because we can play all the strings, but when we scoot up to this F chord, this is like the easiest F you'll ever play. They get a little bit weird if you play them in a more full way. This low E string doesn't really go with this F, so that sounds a little bit nasty. So it's a great happy accident that our thumb is on the 6th string for that F chord. So we're back and forth. We'll also practice moving this back and forth. Okay, now back to 4/4 time. Let's do the same thing and add that beat back in. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Scoot it up. Okay, we're working our way towards playing what is called a rumba. Now let's play just with our thumb, just to recap and exercise that thumb. Same exact rhythm we just did. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Just with the index now. Now the middle and ring squeeze together on every downstroke, thumb on the upstroke. Okay, now all we have to do is take one thing out that we just did, and we're gonna have this really great Spanish guitar rhythm called the rumba. This line is called a tie, and what that means is we play what's to the left of the tie as we normally would, but what's after the tie, to the right, the thing that it's connected to, we just wait. So this time on the 3rd beat, we're going to not do anything, but just let the chord ring out. So let's try that whole thing with just the index finger. 1, 2, and... Now what's really weird there where that tie is, we're not doing anything, so you think it would be easier, but because there's kind of a blank beat there, we want to make sure that we don't stop or pause there. We don't want to wait for too little time either. So we can use our thumb as a timekeeper, like this. 1, 2, and sit on the 6th string, and then with our index, we'll go up, down, up. Remember how I said on the and of 4, we very often go up with the index? Well, this, I think, is why. We can keep our thumb anchored. We can still use it to get more volume at the beginning of the measure, and at the end, we'll keep it anchored and we'll use our index. So before the tie, all thumb. After the tie, all index. 1, 2, and sit, and 4, and see how sitting on the thumb can tell us exactly where the 3rd beat is, and that way we're still doing something on the 3, but that tie is taken care of. It's really weird sometimes when there's that blank spot, the ties, people get really mixed up there. So use your thumb if you need it to make sure you know exactly where that tie is. 1, 2, and sit, and 4, and down, down, up, sit. Okay, so if all that feels comfortable for you so far, let's look at different ways we can notate percussion on the guitar. We can do a golpe, which sometimes is notated with an asterisk, or sometimes with a box shape. And that just means that we are tapping with our ring finger. There's other fingers you could use as long as we get that tap sound, but this is the kind of conventional finger to use, ring finger. I'm leaving it curved and tapping in like this. We could do that with a thumb downstroke. That is hard to do, but I think a really great way to get a cool percussive sound. If we wanted to put that into what we were just doing, we could go 1, 2, and... complicated, more advanced way of doing that rumba. I was doing the thumb and the golpe at the same time, and then using the M&A like we talked about, down, and then up, sitting my thumb on that third beat where that tie is, and with the index going up, down, up. Now we can also slap the guitar really anywhere that you want for now. As you're experimenting with things, you can slap wherever you want, but we'll see a giant X over the string sometimes in tablature, or we might just see little tiny X's over the notes in the notation, and that just means we're gonna hit the guitar. So we could do this on the third beat where we were just keeping time and making sure that we didn't play over that tie. Let's slap the guitar right there. 1, 2, and slap, and 4, and do all index, but that feels kind of weird because when you do an upstroke and then a slap, your finger is stuck here. That's why you'll almost always see a slap preceded by a thumb upstroke. That way it just gets you right in this perfect hand position for slapping. Okay, so now I have a quiz for you. You're gonna see on the screen different combinations of the notes we've talked about: whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, and eighth notes. A metronome will be playing, and you have to produce the rhythm that it's telling you to play. And you can use any finger that you want, that doesn't matter, but do try to play down on the numbers, and if there's an and in there, play an up. Let's just recap real quick all of our different rhythmic values here. 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a whole note, right? A half note gets 2 beats, so we would go 1, 2, 3, 4. Quarter notes, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 1 beat, 1 time per beat, right? 1 stroke per beat. Then eighth notes, 2 times per beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay, let's mix these up for a little quiz. Go for it. Okay, so hopefully you got that right. Let's look at what it's supposed to sound like here. We have 8 measures, and we're starting off here with a half note. 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice there on the end, I snuck in a tie. So we have 2.5 beats, the equivalent of that, just ringing out till the end of the measure. So this is just the beginning with strumming notation. There are rests, there's triplets, there's all kinds of crazy stuff coming up, like dotted notes. But first you have to get this down and understand it, and try to do these yourself in terms of like mixing them up. Like we could do a measure where you randomize it. Sometimes you'll do a couple of eighth notes and you'll do a half note, and try to imagine what that notation would look like. We're not really reading music. This is the rhythm part of it. It's the most important half of reading music, I think, especially now that everything's in tablature. You need to be able to at least decipher some of those rhythms that are written in the standard notation above the tablature. Strumming really is a great place to start for Spanish guitar because we're just hitting the strings with a finger rather than doing something more intricate where we have to really aim our fingers. If you're able to play that rumba, check out this video where I show you how to play the Gypsy Kings rumba.